everyone. This is Coach Becky from Doc Wayne, and this is episode 5 of Doc Wayne's Kids and COVID-19 webinar series. And we're so happy to be here with Emmy-winning NBC Sports Boston anchor, Trenni Kusnierek. Hi, Trenni.
Hi, Becky. Thanks for having me.
Of course, and we're just giving it a few moments as everyone trickles in on Facebook Live. If you're here with us on Facebook Live, give us a thumbs up or a wave. Hi, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. And please remember to like us on Facebook, as well as put your comments and your questions down below. And again, if you're just joining us on Facebook Live, this is Coach Becky from Doc Wayne, and I'm here with Emmy-winning NBC Sports Boston anchor, Trenni Kusnierek. And this is episode 5 of Doc Wayne's Kids and COVID-19 webinar series. So Trenni, thank you again for joining us. How have you been?
Considering the circumstances, not bad. It's weird. We were talking before we went live and just sort of kind of getting to know each other, right. Virtually. And it's weird because it's almost like we're all getting used to this new life of being sort of inside a lot. And I think that a lot of us have fallen into routines. I feel really, really lucky. I'm still working 5 days a week, and having that structure and schedule, I think, has really been important for my mental health. I also think now that it's sunny outside a lot more and the weather is a little bit nicer, you can go outside with, a mask and do some of the things that we like to do outdoors. I think that's been a huge boost. But it was tough for a while. There were a couple of weeks where there were days where it felt really oppressive to be inside, and just that lack of human connection, and even like real weird tiny things like human touch that you don't think about. I actually have I was able to quaranTEAM, which is now a word. Like, you have a team of people that you quarantine with because you know where you've been and you're all friends. If you're like me and you're unmarried and don't have kids, you have to kind of have your own family. And we went down to a friend's house on the Cape, and we were cooking dinner in her kitchen and moving around, and like the little things of like putting your hand on someone's back to move around them, or brushing up against each other as you're moving, and sitting at a dinner table close and having that. It's an intimacy that I almost had forgotten was so lovely. And that actually really sort of lifted my spirits a little bit. I think that really helped. So hopefully we're getting to a point where we can expand those circles a little bit safely and have some of those interactions I think a lot of us are really missing.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're doing well. And I love that term around teams. Like Doc Wayne's all about teams, and we're trying to expand that bubble a little bit and try to make ourselves feel connected. That's a big piece of our Creating Champions curriculum, is just feeling that connectedness to others. And tell us from your perspective how sports are doing as we try to reemerge, and like the impact of COVID-19 on the sports community.
I mean, it's obviously been huge, right? I mean, if you really think about it, not to give the NBA too much credit, but where would we be if Rudy Gobert didn't test positive? Think of how that accelerated our country's reaction to this, and saying, hold on a second. Okay, one guy's sick. Now we have to isolate this. Let's shut down. But when that happened, all of a sudden it was a domino effect. Everybody started sending teams home and shutting things down. And it really, I think, woke all of us up to how quickly and easily this can spread, even among really healthy people. But it's been hard to not have, I think for a lot of people, to not have sports, and not just to watch on TV or watch a pro athlete, but also, my heart goes out to kids, especially those kids who are in senior year of high school or college, who've had to miss the end of their seasons that they were participating in because school was abruptly canceled. Sports is such a huge part and fabric of our communities and our friendships and everything that not everyone does, but a lot of us do. And I think there's really been a void. I mean, I don't know how many people on this, watching this right now, watched any of the sporting events this weekend. There was Bundesliga, which is the German soccer league. There was the Drive for Relief, which was like a charity golf match. And then NASCAR actually held a regular race. And I watched the soccer and golf. And when golf was on, because I could actually understand what they were saying. They weren't speaking in German. I had like a giddiness that I had forgotten how much I loved sports. And later that night, I'm watching The Last Dance, and I'm seeing like, people in the stands and getting all excited. And I thought to myself, well, I really do miss that connection, because even when we're watching The Last Dance, which is a retrospective, everybody's on Twitter and talking about it and discussing it. I mean, sports, even when we're apart, brings us together, which is why I think so many people would like to see sports come back in a controlled environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you've seen this, but I've been loving the Dear Sports videos that have been going viral. And the first one I watched, I started to feel that I got goosebumps, because I was just like, oh, that just like hits home so much. And tell us, like, how did you get involved, and what's been your journey in terms of sports and communications? And then also, you're really a mental health advocate. And how did that all come to be for you?
I'll take the sports part first.
Yeah.
I was actually like a not great athlete growing up. My hand-eye coordination, not great. Like I played softball, volleyball, I swam. I tried gymnastics, but I was like too tall and gangly. And then I was too tall and like not gangly anymore and a little pudgy to be a gymnast. So it took me a while to find my footing. Lots of people laugh at this, but in high school, I was captain of my dance team. We called it pom-pom squad back in the 90s.
Okay.
So it wasn't like I was like this, all-American 3-sport athlete in high school and college. I just grew up really loving sports. Growing up in the Midwest in Wisconsin with my family, and like sports was a way that I just identified with both my parents, my mom and my dad. I loved football. I loved baseball, really loved baseball. And that love of sports led me to going into communications. And when I first went into journalism, broadcast journalism at Marquette University, I actually really thought that I wanted to be like the next Jane Pauley, which there's probably a generation of people watching saying, who's that? Unless you watch CBS Sunday Morning. But when I was growing up, at least, she was like the anchor. She was on the Today Show. She was everything. And then in college, I was watching a football game with a guy that I knew from high school that happened to go to the same school as me. And I was mad about something that was happening during a Packers game, and we were talking about it. And I was like, why didn't they do this? And he's like, you should be a sports reporter. They like let girls do that now. And I was like, you know what? That's a good idea. I love sports. And they do let women do that now. And so that's how I got into it. I just saw it as like a path to do something that I loved, and make it a career. As for mental health, I've struggled my entire life with anxiety and depression. Again, as a kid growing up in the 80s and 90s, we didn't have the vocabulary that we do now to talk about it. We didn't have the resources or really the knowledge for parents to understand that what their child was going through was something mental health related. Something that really stuck out for me when I was a kid, I would go away from home and I would get violently ill with like being homesick. And it wouldn't even matter if I was away with my parents on a trip. I could be without them. I could be on like a Girl Scout camping trip, or in high school, like away with, my pom-pom squad on something. And my stomach would be in such knots that I would either not be able to eat, or I would make myself sick to the point of vomiting. And my parents just called it homesickness. That was, no one ever thought of it as being anxiety. I mean, I remember times of being really nervous about going to school, trying to fake sick, locking myself in my bedroom with all the lights off, not wanting to talk to anyone. And it was never at that point anything more than, teenage angst, or just regular kind of sort of mental growing pains. And looking back now and knowing what I do after going through therapy and the knowledge of that, I can see that those were all back then telltale signs of someone who's struggling with anxiety and depression. It wasn't until I, graduated from college and saw a therapist and was diagnosed that sort of the light bulb went on. But even when it did, I certainly didn't talk about it publicly. As a young reporter, someone who was in the public eye, I didn't want to keep myself from getting a job. I didn't want to put myself at risk for not getting insurance coverage and having a pre-existing condition. So these were all fears that I had. So it took me, I was first diagnosed with depression in 2000, I think midway through 2000. And it wasn't until May of 2012 that I finally spoke publicly about my struggles. And it happened because of sports. Sadly, Junior Seau died by suicide And for whatever reason, I didn't know him personally. I just interviewed him maybe a handful of times, and that might even be an exaggeration. It might have only been once or twice. But I watched him, and it was someone that seemed larger than life to me. And it was a player I saw on the field all the time. And the thought that he was struggling inside was something that I had intimately understood, and then lost that struggle with his illness really hit home for me. And I thought to myself, why aren't we talking about this more? Why aren't more people putting their voice to it? I have a voice. I have a platform. Maybe I should use it for this.
Yeah. Thank you so much for using your voice and using your platform. I really appreciate it as someone who works with youth and believes in the power of sport. It's incredibly appreciated. And I think just you speaking here on Facebook Live and to our Dockwing community and to our global sport community, you're making change just in this moment. So I thank you for that. But you spoke about sport a bit, and you talked about how sport enabled you to speak about that. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how sport may be therapeutic?
Yeah, I mean, as far as sports, giving me an outlet to talk about it, I mean, there was actually a point in my career where I had gone through a pretty tough time during my career. I was at a job that felt very suffocating. I didn't feel like I was doing what I wanted to do. I gone through a really deep depressive episode during that time while living in New York City. And when I left that job, I actually took some time off and thought about getting out of sports altogether, or not out of sports, out of media altogether. The pressure of being a woman, the pressure of just having eyes on you all the time and everything you do being scrutinized, and it being such a subjective industry where one person can think you're great at your job and the next person can think you're terrible at it. That just really exacerbated my anxiety and my depression. And so there was a time where I had thought very deeply and very long about going into nonprofit work instead. But I love sports broadcasting. Like I love sports. I love games. I love competition and athletes, and I love asking questions and learning about people. So I think there was a part of me that was hesitant to leave. And luckily I had a mentor in my life who I had lunch with and said, these are the two things I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about going to work for this nonprofit and heading up this foundation. Or I'm thinking about maybe taking this other job in radio and TV back in my hometown in Milwaukee and easing my way back in after some time off into sports. And I said, what would you do if you were me? And we talked about my passion for nonprofit. And at that point, she said, she said, as sad as it is, you can do more good when you have a public face than when you don't. And she said, so if you really are passionate about certain issues and you want to get that message across and you still love doing what you do, she said, stay in the sports media spectrum. It's just going to give you opportunities that working for a nonprofit won't, because after a while you'll disappear from the public eye. And so I chose to stay in it. And then like 3 or 4 months later is when I decided to do this article and talk publicly about my battle with anxiety and depression. And as sports being therapeutic, I'm not very coordinated, but I do love distance sports. And so I'm a marathon runner. I really like to cycle. I like swimming. There's something for me in the repetition of it. It can be really monotonous. And the longer, the better. Like if I jump into a pool in the summer and I swim 4 laps, I'm like, oh, this is the worst. But by like lap number 300, I'm like, oh, this is so great. You feel the water and you just get into this place. Same with the long run. I would rather run a half marathon than a 5K because like my lungs burning in a 5K and my legs with the lactic acid, like I'm like, oh, this is awful. But if I can stay at that steady pace, there's somewhere that my mind goes and focuses when I'm running that is really helpful for me. And I don't think that I could be as healthy mind and body if I didn't have sports. And it also gives you a community. I mean, running, cycling, all those things are technically individual sports, right? But I have coaches, I have running groups, I have cycling buddies. And even though we're doing it on our own and our own pace, or maybe just in a small pack together, we all support each other, which for me is really just the best part about sports, right? It's teamwork. It's learning to support others. It's learning to sometimes be a leader, but sometimes knowing when to be a follower, and when to bounce ideas off of other people. So I find it to be really really life-changing for me, especially again as someone who wasn't like an all-star 3-sport athlete growing up.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that you stuck with it and you stayed in it. So, because we're in this pandemic, do you have any specific tips or words of wisdom for our kids out there, or our coaches, or others who are just looking to be an advocate? And they may not have the platform that you do, they may not be on TV every day, but how can they make change in this new world that we live in, to really elevate mental health? Any words of wisdom for us?
I mean, I just think the best way to do it is, I don't think, while I think you can get a message out to more people if you have, a lot of Twitter followers or Instagram or a television show every night that you can maybe sneak something in on. But I do think that there is a lot of power in community, and there's a lot of power in, if you're the coach for a sports team and you destigmatize mental health and those feelings and the way kids might be processing things right now, and make them feel like it's okay to tell you what they're feeling and be honest with you, that's the greatest source of change, right? Because again, having grown up in a different generation, I think a lot of us who are of a certain age, it was especially, I think among male athletes, there's this idea that you have to just buck up and be strong and keep your emotions in check and on the inside. And anything less than that is weakness, where I think we're finally learning and coming to terms with the fact that there is so much strength and vulnerability, and being able to admit that things aren't always perfect. And sometimes, you aren't the person you want to be, or you don't feel the way you want to be. And I think if you're a parent or a coach or an aunt or an uncle or a godparent, anything you are in like a child's life, giving them an environment where they feel comfortable really telling you how they feel, and knowing they won't be judged for it or shamed for it, is so powerful. And you don't need a social media platform for that. If anything, that's best done on a small, intimate level, maybe just over dinner. I mean, I think families are finally having dinner together, right?
Yeah.
And all those small little moments that you can make that child or that teenager or even a college kid just feel comfortable in their own skin, and not feel alone.
Yeah, relationships right now are so powerful. And if they're in your home, or if you're not with that athlete or that person, just making sure that you're reaching out, and
Right.
you're trying to help people feel that power of that relationship, or that power of sport if it is that student athlete relationship. And finally, Trenni, what are you doing for yourself these days? Do you have anything that you want to share with people about self-care and helping us stay physically active or emotionally well as we try to ride out this pandemic together?
Yeah, every time I give advice, I always asterisk it and say, it should be noted, I have no children. So it's very easy for me. Like, self-care is my life. I have no one else to care for except for myself. So it's very easy. But I do think something that's good for everyone is scheduling, right? Schedule, like, I write everything out. I'm a list person. So I don't feel like, it's like I always go into Monday thinking of all the things I have to do all week long. Like, I have to do laundry. I have to go to the grocery store. I've got a doc weighing thing at 1:30 on a Tuesday. I've got a financial planner meeting at 1:30 on a Thursday. I've got this work thing or this social thing I want to do. But it's like, okay, what on this list is important? What on this list is good for me? And what can I sneak in or squeeze in around that so that I'm taking care of myself? Like, my day usually starts now that we have a little more time. We're not commuting. I'll take my coffee. Maybe I'll go on a meditative walk in the morning. Or maybe I'll go I live in the city and not far from the harbor. So I'll go sit like on a bench, and maybe I'll meditate there instead of in my home. I'll work out in the morning. I'll find a buddy, one, or two buddies, to loop in throughout the weeks, to work out with. I think just those even tiny moments. And my friends who are parents, really do, I think, their best, whether it's getting up before everybody else, having a really candid conversation with their spouse. Like, I need 60 minutes a day, or I need 30 minutes a day to go take a walk by myself and just get out of my head. I also think, and I'm a huge proponent of this, no matter what in self-care, not having your phone in your bedroom. about a year and a half ago, I got a real, like, not old school alarm clock because it has like sound making on it. And it's got like one of those like gradual alarms that like slowly wakes you up. But not having my phone in my room has improved my sleep. I mean, exponentially. When I crawl into bed at night, I read for, even if it's only 15 or 20 minutes, but my brain gets shut off. I don't have that blue light. Those waves aren't coming from like my nightstand right next to my bed. And I think I think we're all so connected all the time that it's like we don't realize that it's nice to disconnect. So I think even that, if that's the only thing you have time for, if like you have to pay attention, and obviously you have to pay attention to your children, but maybe turning your phone on do not disturb and putting it in another room while you're working with them so that your brain isn't like 16 other places. If it's just focusing on one thing, it can really truly be present.
Yeah, and as someone who does have kids, I appreciate those comments, and I love the piece about if you can only do one thing, because it's hard to take in 100 different suggestions about self-care, but if you can pick one thing and then maybe accomplish that and then maybe add one more thing on, I think that's manageable for people. But Trenni, I just want to really thank you for today. And want to remind people that this is part of a larger series called Kids and COVID-19, and we're on episode 5. And if you're interested in the past episodes, you can find them on our YouTube page, and the handle for that is Doc Wayne DTG. And if anyone needs any help around their mental health, you can reach us at support@docwayne.org, or always on our website at docwayne.org. And if you don't know about us, our name is Doc Wayne, and our mission is to fuse sport and therapy to heal and strengthen at-risk youth. And right now, we're providing telehealth to kids and families. So any questions about that at all, feel free to reach out to us. And we're here for you, absolutely here for you. So please don't feel like you can't ask us about mental health supports or resources for you. But Trenni, any last words before we sign off?
No, my only question for you is if people who are watching want to help support Doc Wayne, how can they do that? Where can they go and donate either time or money, whatever is feasible for them right now?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. They can reach
That wasn't prompted, by the way. I want to make everyone aware of that. It wasn't like, could you ask this at the end?
Yeah, that was totally out of the blue, not asked, but I appreciate that question. And our team is so hardworking and doing such great work during this time. You can reach us at our website at docwayne.org, but truly anytime you can reach us at support@docwayne.org, and we will find the right person for your question. And we do want to make our services available to many more kids and families, because this secondary pandemic of mental health is going to last 1 or 2 more years, according to the World Health Organization. And so we are preparing ourselves to be available to these kids and families and to make sure they're well supported when they re-enter school and sports and the community. And we do greatly value your support around that and want to make sure that our team is ready to go. So Trenni, thank you so much. And to everyone, we wish you the best and want you to stay healthy and happy during this very challenging time, and appreciate you prioritizing mental health and sport. So Trenni, thank you, and stay well. Bye-bye from Doc Wayne.